See if I'm paying attention.
We're live. It's Parashat V'etchanan, and we're in the beautiful Alshech synagogue. We have the synagogue of learning the Alshech on the Parashat. And it's a very special week because this week we're going to learn about Moshe Rabbeinu's prayer to Hashem. And in a way, it's a very special thing to learn about because it's really teaching us a lot about prayer, and actually more later on in the piece, Holy Alshech will go on talking about the specific lessons about prayer that we learn from Moshe, but also just the entire experience of how Moshe deals with Hashem, trying to get something that Hashem told him no already, and he swore about it, and he's really trying to pray, he believes that it can still be. So we have to understand how he gets the guts to do that, and then when he does have the right and feels he should do it, how he does it. So let's get right in it. V'etchanan el Adonai be'et hahi lemor. At that time, I pleaded with Hashem. I asked Hashem for a free gift, Rashi says. So the Rav Moshe says, Lavo el anyan parasha, as we do here in the Rav Moshe Sefer, to get involved in the parasha, we'll go straight into questions, questioning the intricate details of the parasha to give us a hint into what's happening. So the first question we have, what's mentioned just before this in the end of the parasha is the final stage that they're standing in the desert, ready to go in Arbat Moav, and the families of Gad and Reuven want to live across the Jordan in the west bank and the east bank of the Jordan, and that's the last thing we finish off with, last parasha. So how is that following? And he says that this is the next thing that happened. Number 2, Omro ba'et hahi. Specifically it mentions, I prayed that in that time. So what is specifically relevant in the time that he decided to start speaking, to pray then, and why does he mention it to them, that it was at that time? Number 3, we have the question, the weekly question, Lemor. What does lemor mean in this case? Because obviously Moshe was speaking to Hashem, and there was nothing that Hashem had to repeat to anyone from here. So ki enol lemor lazulat, obviously it doesn't mean that Hashem should repeat this to anyone else. Ad shehutzruchu rabbeinu lefaresh. This is actually a very strong question, the lemor here, that's why the Midrash even got involved and asked the question that usually Rav Moshe asks, and now this question is even more poignant because the Midrash felt the need to ask it. And it explains in the Sifri, shelo yazuz misham. Moshe was telling Hashem, I am here to stay, I am not leaving this prayer, ad yashiv lo yitbarach, until Hashem replies with an answer regarding the prayer. V'chazer omro lemor elav yitbarach. So the Midrash explains that lemor means that Hashem should not repeat something that he's telling him, but rather reply and respond with an answer to the prayer. Sheyashiv yomar lo. So this is the Midrash, and Rav Moshe is going to go with a different explanation. And he's saying that in this week we really have to understand what the lemor here is. Number 4, Amrosh Shnei Shemot Elu Yachad. What is the double use of Hashem's name? Right? Obviously in English we say Hashem Elokim, Hashem God, and there's words for it, but in the Hebrew always that every name of Hashem is referring to a different energy that Hashem reveals. So what is significant about these two names, which is Adnut, Aleph Daled Nun Yud, Vasheni Havaya B'nikudat Elohim. This is, I think, the first time in the Torah, or maybe the only time in the Torah, that actually mentions this type of Shem, Hashem's name, which is the Shem Havaya.
I was wondering that. Is that the first time in the Torah that those two names are brought together?
Not only is it brought together, I mean, always when you have this Yud Ke Vav Ke read as Elokim, it's always with a Hashem Adnut, before or after. And that is actually the indicator that this Havaya, this Yud Ke Vav Ke is read differently, because we say Hashem, it will be the same pronunciation of Hashem and Hashem, right? The Aleph Dal Nun Yud is also read the same as Yud Ke Vav Ke, so that tells us.
But hang on, they read it in the Torah, they don't say Hashem.
No, they say Ado and Elo, right? But the second Elokim, right? So this is a strange concept of a Yud Ke Vav Ke, which is actually to be read as Elokim, not like the regular Adnut, which we usually say Yud Ke Vav Ke. So the fact that there's two names and the fact that specifically these two names is something we need to figure out and look into. Omro atah chilota. So the beginning of Moshe's prayer, he starts off saying to Hashem, you have began showing me your greatness. So what does it mean when when he says, you've began showing me? This is actually the end of all the miracles, really. Because they've gone out of Egypt, they've gone through the Yam Suf, they've fought wars, they've seen everything. So what does he mean by you've just began? Why does he feel like all that they've seen now in the last 40 years was all just a beginning? So Yomar Sha'kol Haytat Chala Belvad, to say that all these miracles are just the beginning, Mehara Uya Yalomar. Hayata Hereta et Avdecha Godlacha. You have shown to your servant your greatness. Not to say that you've began showing, because that's kind of saying that there's nothing really happened till now, but really there was so many miracles. That's number 5. Number 6, Ki ech yomar laharot et avdecha. He's focusing on the fact that Hashem has began showing his servant, specifically Moshe, speaking to him. Why is it that he's singling himself out as the one to have witnessed these great miracles of Hashem, while it was done in front of the entire Jewish population? Halo gam lechol Yisrael herahu yizbarach et kol hazot. Hashem showed this to everyone equally. Number 7, Omro asher mi el bashamayim sheyoreh ki yesh el zurato yitbarach chalila. So we're saying basically, when Moshe says there is no God in heaven and earth that can do as great things as you can do. So that seems to imply that there are other gods, but you top the cake. You're the big boss God. So how can Moshe infer that there are other gods, just not as adequate as Hashem? Number 8, Omro Brana. So now we're moving over to the actual prayer of Moshe. After he's introduced the prayer saying, Hashem, you've shown me your greatness, he's now actually asking for what his request is. And he says, Brana. I shall go over, I want to go over into Israel. Na. So the word na can mean two things. It can either mean now, or it can mean please. But when he says the usual translation that the Chazal, the rabbis say, is usually when it means please. So she'imhu lashon bakasha, because like Rashi says, Rashi generally says na means please, whereas the Targum 99% of the time says na means now. Ka'an is the Targum for na. And only one place, or very few places, one place is when Moshe prayed for Miriam, he said el na, refa na la. So there's two nas. So there's please and right now. But usually when it's one, Rashi goes with please. So Rav Moshe is asking, Ebra na is interesting because you should say na before the beginning of your request. Say please, so and so. Here he's saying, he's beginning to speak. He's saying, I want to pass please into the land. So the please is out of place. Number 9, Omro Haratov. He says, where do I want to go? I want to go across the Jordan, and I want to go and come to the place that's called the Good Mountain. Al Haratov. Al Eza Har Yadaber. Which mountain is considered here a good mountain that Moshe wants to see? That wants to go there. Imhu Al Hara Moriah, if he's referring to, as the Midrash and the rabbis say, it's referring to the good mountain, the mountain of the Har Moriah, of the Beit Mikdash is going to be Ech Yomar Hazeh. How can he say this good mountain? Which would imply that he's standing in front of it and saying this mountain. But obviously Har Moriah is not within eyesight of across when you're in the west bank of the Jordan. Or is it the east bank of the Jordan? So that's the question. If he was actually referring to a mountain which is out of sight, he should have said that mountain. Number 10, Amrov HaLevanon, Shehu Beit HaMikdash. It says, I want to see the good mountain and the Lebanon. What's the Lebanon? Says the rabbis, it's the Beit HaMikdash. He wants to go and see the Beit HaMikdash. The question is, says Rav Moshe, it's not even built yet. So what Beit HaMikdash is he referring to? By the way, the rabbis explain why is Lebanon the Beit HaMikdash? Because Lebanon means white. And the Beit HaMikdash makes the sins of the Jewish people white. Number 11. Amrovait Aber Hashem Bilumanchem. So now Moshe is now going back to the people. After he quoted the prayer that he said to Hashem, he now says, after I prayed, Hashem did not react. He didn't respond in kindness. He responded in anger. Why did he respond in anger? Vait Aber Adonai Bi Lemanchem. Because of you, the people. Meaning he's saying that I was completely non-guilty in this whole story. It's all you guys' fault. But the question says, Rav Moshe, the pasuk says over and over again in 3 different places, I believe, that the reason Moshe doesn't go into Eretz Israel is because he failed in the story of the rock and the water. He and Aaron, both of them, exactly. So how can he go and completely declare himself innocent when Hashem seems to believe he's guilty? Just pushing the blame onto the people. So Rav Moshe has interesting explanations later on how to understand that. The Malbim understands this very interestingly. I saw that just in short that the Malbim says that really Moshe didn't sin. It wasn't his fault for not going into Eretz Israel. The Holy Alshech mentions it later on as well, and this is an interesting theme here that Moshe himself was worthy of going into Eretz Israel. It's just the people weren't worthy, and this already developed itself of Moshe. That's Rav Alshech is going to take this theme as a side theme. The Malbim makes this the main theme that when the spies happened, the people showed they don't really trust in God. They don't believe in miracles like on a crazy nature, above nature level, because they didn't trust Hashem. And they said, we were scared. So Moshe Rabbeinu is above nature leadership. And if he would have gone in, it would have been just a completely spiritual war. Beit HaMikdash would have been a whole other level. And the Jewish people showed that we're not ready for Mashiach yet. We weren't developed enough. And that...
You mean the spiritual war of Midian was only possible because of Moshe?
Right, it's a Moshe war. Hashem told him, you do the war.
Yeah, nobody died. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah, just 12,000 people against a massive country.
Don't we have repetitions of spiritual war with Gideon and all that?
So those were wars fought with weapons and tactics.
Mm-hmm.
And they were actually had to act as if they're fighting a physical
I thought
war.
even King David, when he went in battle, didn't actually battle.
What, with Goliath?
No, it was a tzaddikim within his army that overpowered them rather than...
Right, so there was always obviously the camp. Hashem was in the camp and they carried the Aaron. And it was a very spiritual army because they weren't allowed to have any type of, non-kosher environment, etc., etc. So it was a very, obviously there was God's power within them, but the way the war was faced was with complete reliance on natural tactics and weapons. Whereas Moshe would have been a whole different story, as we see with his wars. I mean, some of his wars weren't. The war with Amalek was with weapons, and they all were with weapons, but they were way less. Right. So Moshe going into Eretz Israel would have been the beginning of spiritual conquering, with prayer and with miracles, and that would have been a whole different reality. So basically, what Hashem told Moshe, the summary of the story is basically to finish the sum of this whole discussion is that Hashem said the people are not ready for Mashiach. So you have to pause for a little bit. When they'll be ready, we'll introduce you back as Mashiach. Right, he is Mashiach. The Neshama of Moshe, Mashe Hayah Hu She'yeh, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe is Mashe Hayah.
If he was a Mashiach, it would have been Mashiach times 10.
Right, but the Mashiach can only come when the people are ready. Mashiach's always ready. Mashiach's waiting for us. So the people weren't ready, and Hashem said it's going to take another 3,000 years. See you later. I mean, he didn't say it was going to take 3,000 years, but that's what's happened, and we're waiting for Moshe to say, "Are you ready for me?" Because he tried to make us ready, and that's really we'll have the whole Devarim we spoke last week about the power of Moshe Rabbeinu's rebuke. He's like, guys, we've got something great going on here. Like, get on board, man. And that's what we're still trying to do. But Karov, he's coming back.
Oh, man.
Okay, so where were we up to? So that's the idea of Moshe Rabbeinu wanting to go to the Beit HaMikdash because he had a big connection. He was heading straight there. That was his zone. He was like, what am I going into the land for? The good mountain and the Lebanon. So but we're asking, it's not there already. It's not there yet, so as they're asking to go there. Amra vayit'aber Hashem bi'lemanchem. So again, we said Moshe was pushing the blame onto them. Sorry, we're up to Yud Bet, the 12th question. Mahina shlosha pa'amim shenemar milat Eli b'pasuk zeh. It says 3 times Eli. Vayit'aber v'yom Hashem Eli, vayit'aber Eli, and I don't have the pasuk here.
There's one pasuk where there's three times Eli.
Right.
It's with the gap. With the gap.
So it says, what does it say? Vayit'aber Hashem bi'lemanchem v'lo shema Eli. Didn't listen to me. And Vayomer Hashem Eli, Hashem said to me, Al tosef daber Eli, do not speak to me. So Hashem's saying 3 times to me, which is interesting because I just realized this now, that the third Eli is a different type of Eli. It's actually talking, Hashem saying, do not talk to me. So it's Hashem saying, to me being to Hashem. The other 2 is Hashem to Moshe. Lo shama Eli, didn't listen to me.
That's right. So
and he said, yeah, it's interesting. But it says it a lot of times, so there seems to be something going on here. Number 13, Amro Ravlach, Ma natan lo, Ma hosif lo, Shamar Ravlach. Ravlach means you've got enough. Be happy with what you've got. What did Hashem refer to when he said to Moshe, you've got it all? What do you mean? I want to go into the land. This is what we're heading for. Why are you telling me what I have is enough? What is it referring to? Gam Omro Al Tosef Umiyutar. When he says, do not continue speaking to me, as long as he said, you have enough, that's basically answering, that's my answer. You want it? No. So why does he have to say, don't continue praying? Omro Ale Rasha Piska. So now Hashem in response says, you're not going into the land, but I could give you this. Go on top of the mountain and see the land with your eyes. So the question is, how does going on top of a mountain, a little hilltop in the east bank of the Jordan, going to get him to see the entire land? It's a large country. To say that his eye would be able to see in all of Eretz Israel, 400 parsa, which is the size that the Gemara and the Zohar explain. Eretz Israel is 400 parsa by 400 parsa. Eino beteva. That's not a natural feat. Even if one goes onto a very steep mountain, very tall mountain, you'll be able to see just about a day's worth of, or a day's day's journey ahead. And here we have another problem, that there are taller mountains in Eretz Israel than this hilltop. And they're going to block. Says Moshe, I've got another suggestion. How did Moshe get to see all of this distance? It was a visual, spiritual vision, like a prophecy kind of thing. So then, if that's the truth, why go to the top of a mountain? You can sit on your couch and get that vision. Number 15.
The first case of virtual reality glasses.
Yeah, spiritual reality.
Virtual reality.
Number 15. Ech b'nesiat einav yir'eh arba'a gvulei Eretz Yisrael ke'echad. So maybe Holy Alshech is basically continuing the previous question. He's saying you can't really see the entire land, but let's say you can see in every direction, but you're not going to see all the way in every direction. To say that you're going to see from the east to the south, from the north to the west, that's not physically possible. How is he describing that he's going to see from end to end? Number 16. If you're continuing around the directions, you start with west, and you'll go to north. What would come after that? East.
East.
South. But what does he do? He says first west, north, south, east. So he's going out of order. After north, he should have said the next one, which is east. And really, he mixes up the order. Number 17. He was standing at the time on the east bank of the Jordan. So therefore, what's he going to see first? He's going to see first the east bank of Eretz Israel, the eastern border. So why does he mention east last? Omra, number 18.
Hashem saying it last, yeah? Hashem mentioning east last.
Yeah, Hashem mentioning this order, yeah. Number 18. Omra Necha. So here again, this is continuing the questions we had before, but how exactly is he going to see? Is it a physical seeing or is it a spiritual seeing? And here it seems to indicate that you're going to see with his eyes. Eyes usually mean physical eyes. So he's asking, what then are you going to see with? So that's already kind of, suggesting there's another version of seeing, which you mentioned before, but it seems the pasuk is saying, no, he's going to see with his eyes. It's like we say in davening, like we want to see with our physical eyes, Enough with the believing. Number 19. Amro kilot ta'avor. You won't go across. When he tells him, go and see the land, because you won't go over, you won't cross the river. He should have said, ach lo ta'avor. He should have said, you can see it, but that's only seeing. Going across, it's not going to happen. So the key doesn't seem to follow on with what he said beforehand. Magam shum yutar, really should have left out completely. Even if he doesn't say you won't cross the river, this is what we're saying basically. We're telling him, go to the top of the mountain and see it. Why am I telling you to see it? Because you're not going to go in. So what's the need to mention the fact explicitly? Number 20, there's another mention of Moshe Rabbeinu being told to give instruction to Yeshua. And we already had that in last week's parasha. We had that earlier on. But Yeshua Tziveti, Moshe Rabbeinu is mentioning already that in the end of last parasha that he spoke to Yeshua and gave him over the command and the instruction of how to lead. So why mention it here again? Number 21. Chaf Aleph, Amra et haaretz asher tireh, ki amra asher tireh hum yutar. He's saying Yeshua will lead them into the land that you will see. What's he saying here specifically about the fact that they're going into the land that he will see? How is that relevant? The fact that he's going to see the land to the fact that the Jews are going to go into the land. And we're basically seeing an idea here that Moshe Rabbeinu seeing the land was to enable and to connect to the land that the Jews are going to go into.
To allow them to conquer it.
Right. Like he's doing some kind of behind the scenes work. Number 22. He finishes off saying, and then we settled in the valley across from Baal Peor of Zara. How is that a conclusion of what has been mentioned until now regarding the prayer? Number 23. Amrov Ata Yisrael Shema. Now you Israel, listen to me. Ha'im yesh et lishmoa ve'et lo lishmoa. Sheyomar va'ata Yisrael Shema. He says, now listen to me. What does he mean by now? Now listen, and when not listen? We always have to listen to Moshe. Interestingly, the Chazal Rashi brings say ve'ata means tshuva. The Gemara says en va'ata ela tshuva. Whenever it says va'ata in the Torah, you should know it's referring to tshuva. And the explanation is because, that's what the Gemara points this out very strongly. He says that what is tshuva is when you have nothing in the past, all you have is now. The past is completely not hidden, no chains from the past pulling you in any direction. So va'ata means, even though you guys have sinned and all of this chaos you've caused, but you should know, all you have is right now, and right now just connect to the mitzvah. You got nothing pulling you away. But Rav Moshe is going to take it in a different explanation. But it does seem interesting. Va'ata, like what does that refer to? Number 24. Shema lashon yachid v'yeter pasuk lashon rabim. The pasuk starts off Shema talking to every individual Jew, and then it says that I command to you as a people, etc. So why does it start off singular and become plural? Number 25. Amrolo tosifu lishmor mitzvot Hashem. He says you should do all the mitzvot and keep them and do not add and subtract. Mi lo yada ki kol hatzivur ezehu kedei lishmor v'lishmor kol mitzvotav yitbarach. So why are we saying at the end that the entire purpose is to do the mitzvot? We're talking about the mitzvot themselves. Number 26. Masha samach v'amar enechem haraot yira'eh bilti v'kushar lakodem. Suddenly Moshe goes into a rant about how Hashem punished those who got involved in the Baal Peor. He says, you guys experienced this. You saw what happens. You saw what happens with those that serve idol worship. There was a Magefa of 24,000 people. If not for Pinchas's heroic act, there would have been no Jewish people anymore. So Moshe is saying, you know how this stuff is dangerous. So the question is, why is it mentioning it here? The context seems out of place. Where should have he mentioned it? Yir'eh biltim b'kushar. He mentioned early on that they were stationed at the valley near Baal Peor, so that's where he should have mentioned, we got to the valley and you guys messed up. Why is it out of order? When he says, you guys saw, what's this question? It seems like he's telling the Jews that they saw with their own eyes. Like he's trying to prove it to them. Like you got to believe me, you saw it. That doesn't seem to be his intention. It sounds like Moshe is saying that when he says that you saw it, it's not like Moshe is like saying, oh, you don't believe me, but you saw it. That's not the vibe. Okay, so that's the questions. We have 26 questions, like the Shem's name. 26, Chavav. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the beginning of the questions. The questions we saw in the beginning was, What is the follow-on from the previous parasha to this discussion? The first thing a person would come up with to explain how this discussion follows on the end of last parasha. The end of last week's parasha, let's find it again, finishes off in the last two psukim of last week's parasha is I commanded Yeshua, I gave him over the instruction, and he said, do not fear the nations and go and conquer them. That's how the parasha finishes off last week. So how does that connect the fact that he gave the command over to Yeshua to the fact of this prayer? Says Ramosha that the Jewish people started complaining against Moshe. He's like, what, you seriously going to do this? You're going to give it over to Yeshua? What about you? Are you just leaving us? Like, you're our man. You've been with us for 40 years. We know you're amazing. Don't leave us now. So Moshe, to answer this claim, Moshe says, don't think I didn't try. I tried. I tried. And God said no. Right? So the people are saying, why have you now forsaken us? Now Moshe adds juice to the claim of the Jewish people. The Jewish people will tell Moshe, did you not realize that Hashem is now open for mercy? Because he's now conquered these two mighty giant nations. And just like that. So you see that he's now changing his attitude. He likes us. He's on for it. So you might as well use this opportunity to say, Hashem, have the plans changed somewhat? Right? So they turn to the Jews, you've now began conquering the land already. Now you should go and beg God for a gift, for forgiveness. That you should be able to bring us in to the land. This would be an amazing zchut for us if you would be the one. This would make the whole entire entering the land a whole different story. You'll cross us over the Jordan and you'll inherit it to us. Hashem won't withhold this from you. Now that you've seen He's allowed you to conquer these two nations, give it out, inherit it. So Hashem's now showing you that He's changed His mind. He's let you conquer and divide. Conquer and inherit. And what are you doing? Instead of praying to God, what are you doing? You've given up. All you've done is given over the command to Yeshua without even putting up a fight. And you've left us behind. Says Ramosha, this is what the Moshe's response straight away is. This should not enter your mind, this option. I prayed to God, I beseeched Him, at that time. Which time? The time when Hashem mercifully allowed me to conquer Sichon and Og. That's when I used that opportunity, like you guys say. I did use that opportunity. So here he's answering three of the questions that we started off with. The continuation of last week's parasha is answering why he's appointed Yeshua. He's saying, because I have no choice. I prayed and I didn't get an answer. When did I pray, says Moshe? At the time you're suggesting, the time when I conquered, etahi, at that time. So now he's retelling the story now because it has relevance. At the time when he mentions the fact that he conquered Sichon and Og, he doesn't talk about the fact that he prayed to go in, even though it happened chronologically then. But now it becomes relevant to tell it to the Jews to allay their fears. And when he says, the pasuk says lemor, it means that he only now was a time he can open his mouth to speak. This was an opportune time to say prayer to God. So that's what the lemor means in this explanation. It was a time, but etahi was a time that was fitting lemor to say the following prayer. Oh yeah, Amer. Another explanation what the lemor means. Hashem was so far from answering this prayer because the prayer had been promised and had been said in a very strong manner. So much so that I needed even permission to pray. Because if praying could be actually great disrespect. Hashem has said something, and He's decided in a very firm manner, and you're coming now and saying, but maybe, but please, like what? Like that's not how Hashem works. So Moshe needed permission. Leimor, first of all, to even Kadeshi Arsheni Leimor Lefanav, Divrei Tfilat Tizot. I had to get permission. I prayed to be able to pray. Ve'et Chanan al Hashem. That time I prayed, I beseeched Hashem, Leimor, may I speak to you? And then I spoke to him because I got permission to speak. Thank you, Hashem, we don't need to ask for permission to speak. We can just speak at any time. And Rav Moshe is actually going to tell us that later on, I don't forget to it, that's why we say before Shemona Esrei, Adonai Sfatai Tiftach, Ofi Yagid Telatecha. It's basically asking permission to open my mouth. Because really speaking to the infinite Lord, what does that even mean? Do we even know like what we're talking to? And so we're saying like, I want you to speak through me. Like, to like actually be able to speak to God, it's unfathomable what really means. And Rav Alshech actually goes, maybe we'll even skip to get to this very powerful piece, like what prayer works, what's the attitude we need to have towards prayer, and that we learn from Moshe, and where we're seeing how Moshe was respectful of Hashem, and he didn't feel like he can just pray and make God change his mind. Chazak Baruch.